story to Jacob, also known as Israel, when it mentions Israel later in the verse. And we find this response by this father toward his son that he thought was long dead. What in the world would that be like for us as human beings? It's almost unfathomable, isn't it? To think that losing someone, a child, and then years later, I don't know exactly how many years, to find out that that missing child, or that child we thought was dead, was actually alive, physically alive. You know, it's fun watching these stories sometimes about reunions. You ever seen one of those on TV? Where some estranged child or missing child after 20, 30 years shows up and reunites with a mom or a dad. It's just those good news stories. Heart moving. Almost unbelievable though, that to think that someone you lost, although you had pretty good proof that they actually died, you didn't go to their funeral and see their body, but yet you had what seemed to be evidence that they were gone, and now they're alive. And how in the world would a parent respond to that? How would disciples respond to that? To know that the person they had put their hope and faith in, who they knew was dead because he was crucified, would now be alive. How would a person respond to that? Well, it tells us in this passage some of the emotions and the actions and the responses of Jacob, Joseph's father, when he found out that his son was alive. Here's what I want us to take from this today. There's lots of directions you can go with an Old Testament passage because it's in narrative form, and that means there isn't one point that you can pull out, but probably several points. The one I want to focus on today is Jacob, for where he was in life at the moment, was able to let the past go. He was able to let the past go. Now let me try and relate this in a way that we can all understand. Let's say that you have a family member, relative in your family, that you got in an argument with. They said something bad about you, they mistreated you, they said something negative about your kids, whatever the case was, and there's been a wall between you and this family member. But you're having a family reunion. And this person happens to show up at this family reunion. And the elephant in the room between the two of you is quite big. Neither one of you have forgotten about what was said or done years prior. And now here you are at this family reunion, and let's say the other person was primarily responsible. They were the ones who perpetrated the hurt. But at this family reunion, they see you, and they kind of walk up to you with a big smile. They're glad to see you, and they want to give you a big hug, and they're just interested in you, and they want to talk to you, and they want to know how you're doing. How are you going to respond to that? Would it be hard to respond to that? Let me ask it this way. Would it be hard to not let your mind and heart go back to that incident and just kind of focus on the beauty of the moment and the positivity of the moment? And say, you know, boy, minus what happened 6 years ago when they did what they did, in this moment, they want to be reunited. They seem to want to talk. They seem to express interest in me. Well, we have that challenge. And in this situation, let us keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, these same brothers who are now telling their father, hey, your son, Joseph, he's alive. He's alive. Do you realize what Jacob where he could have gone with that? And said, whoa, wait a second. Ooh, whoa. Wait a second here. It's not the best acoustics in here. Before I listen to what you have to say, and I get all excited about this idea that my son is alive, we need to deal with this issue that happened way back here. And this issue has to do with something you guys told me 8 years ago about him being dead. And before we deal with that issue, so before I'm going to get excited, we're going to have this big love fest here, we're going to have to deal with the elephant in the room. What happened 8 years? That's human nature. I know this personally because the very person who took my job at the church in Auburn kind of sent some text to me like, hey bro, you know the hey bro text? Hey bro, it's all good. It is all good for you. You got my job. And you didn't do it in the right way. But with him, hey, let's just be friends. Let's go forward. Let's not focus on the past. Let's love on each other. It's really hard for me to not deal with that issue and just focus on the moment and enjoy this person for who they are and the opportunity you have to go forward. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Good. You follow me. So, the good news of Joseph being alive, now we're talking about Jacob, the father, when he was given this news that his son's alive. The good news of Joseph being alive overcame the lie of his loss, that he was dead. At least it did in that moment. Jacob didn't insist that we go back and first deal with, because I'll tell you what I want to do. With my 30-year-long friendship with the guy who took my job at the church, before I responded to those texts and said, yeah, bro, let's go fishing again, like old times. Let's go grab some Starbucks. What do you think I kind of want to do first? Yeah, I want to say, but let's go back to that moment. And let's talk about why you didn't have my back when I was deployed. And let's talk about what happened there for you to navigate your way into my position, which no associate should ever do to his senior. No way should Mike Pence ever undercut Donald Trump as his VP. Even if Donald Trump screws up, which I think he might have done once or twice in his presidency. But even if he does, you want an example in this world of loyalty? Look at Mike Pence. Look at the way he handles. He never makes excuses for his boss, but he supports him every single time. That's loyalty. Doesn't mean you lie for them. It doesn't mean you discard your own convictions, but it means you are faithful to the end to support. He's a great picture of what we need to be toward somebody else. All right, so here he is. Look at what happened. The spirit of Jacob the father, the spirit of their father Jacob, whoops, missed a word. The spirit of their father Jacob revived. Wouldn't yours? To hear that your son that was dead is alive again? I mean, it's exciting. But he could have just immediately, like I said, no, I'm not accepting this. I know good is trying to happen here in my life. I'm not going to accept good. We got to go back and deal with the bad from 8 years ago. I'm not going to let bygones be bygones. No. But it says the spirit, and he was excited. He could have said this. Let's go back, brothers. You are the ones who stood in front of me 8 years ago, 10 years ago, however. You're the ones who stood in front of me and told me this about my son. We need to reconcile this. Let's go ahead and read this, Patty.
They got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe into the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him.
And that was back in Genesis 37. Remember when the brothers did that to Joseph? And then, so this is what Jacob remembers of the story. This is what the father remembers of those brothers telling him. And this isn't making sense when they show up with this new story and say, "Hey, your son Joseph, he's the leader over Egypt. He gave us these carts and these supplies, and he wants you to come back and enjoy the fruit of the land and the plenty of the land. And everything is good now. Everything is good, and we want you to be excited." And Jacob's spirit is excited, and he's revived in his heart that his son that he thought was dead is now alive again. He focused on the truth in the moment instead of the lie of the past. Think of that one for a second. He focused on the truth of the moment instead of the lie of the past. The truth of the moment was, Joseph is alive. He's making provisions for you, Father, to come and join him. Joseph is alive. He's got these carts. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, if it was physical carts to bring back supplies or exactly. Anybody else know? Anybody ever done a study on that?
Yes, sir.
I should have. I'm the pastor, but I didn't. But he sent these carts. Not that much different than these men on the Emmaus Road. This is after Jesus' crucifixion, and after he had resurrected, these two men were walking from Emmaus focused, and the men from Emmaus focused on the good news of the present instead of the pain of the past. They could have said, well, we don't know where his body is. We heard he was supposed to be the Messiah, but now we have no hope because he's not in the tomb. They could have focused on all of these things, but instead, they got up at once and returned to Jerusalem. These are the two men on the Emmaus Road. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." So they focused on the good news of the moment rather than on all of the stuff from the past. And we get this opportunity with people. We get this opportunity with situations in life. Is that, are we going to focus on the moment? Let's say a person who has no right to come back and be friends with you wants to come back and be friends with you. Is your grace big enough to focus on the moment and be friends with them? Or does it have to insist on going back and dealing with the past, whatever that past is? I don't know. I can tell you what human nature says. You owe me an apology. You're going to pay me back that money you owe me before we're going to go out and watch football together. You're going to make this right over here. But even with the resurrection, they were able to focus on the moment instead of letting go of the past. Letting go of the past is a huge issue for us in our lives. It doesn't come easy. But His grace is enough. Nobody said that in their thing, but His grace is enough. Is it to let go of the past? With Jacob, it looks like he doesn't stop him in their tracks and say, "Whoa, wait a second, what about that ferocious animal and his blood and that coat that I made him? And you handed me this coat and said, oh, so sad, your son died. What about that?" No, he doesn't seem to be focused. I don't think in the rest of the story Jacob's ever going to go back to that, to my knowledge. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe good can overcome evil when we don't bring up the evil of the past. The Bible says don't return evil for evil, but overcome evil with good. So maybe in the moment, we have an opportunity with people, with situations, with businesses. Maybe our opportunity to overcome evil with good is to focus on the present and give someone grace and another chance instead of evil for evil or even having to bring up something from the past. I'm always convicted by this verse. Let's read the next one for us, James. The middle one.
It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs.
This is talking about the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. Doesn't dishonor others, love doesn't. It's not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Okay, that's a sermon right there in itself. Because I'll tell you, in a lot of my marriage counseling, one of the things we love to do to our spouses is bring up one of their wrongs from the past. And say, yeah, but you remember when you did this? And what about when you cheated on me? That's always the ultimate one. People will criticize, but when they really want to land a blow, they'll bring up something big from the past. Say, yeah, but you did this. Even though they talked about it 100 times, they'll still bring it up one more time. But God's love, the love of God in us, will give us the ability to not keep record of wrongs. And we do that. And if a person hasn't done enough goods to overcome their bads, then we remind them of their bads so often. And we keep a record of wrongs. Aren't you glad that Jesus has no record of your wrongs today? Or are you glad that He's not going to show a video when you face him one day of your whole life, and everything you've thought and everything you've done behind closed doors and every secret that you have, I am really glad that there's not Donnie Crandell video from birth to 52, the real secrets of his life. I am so thankful to God we do not have a video like that, and he's not keeping a record of my wrongs. The Bible says, as far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our sins from us and buried them in the sea of his forgetfulness. God apparently can forget. We can't. Don't try. You can't forget. We're not designed to forget. We're designed to forgive. Oh, that's a good one. Write that down. We're not designed to forget. We're designed to forgive. And when you forgive well, it's almost the same as forgetting. Almost. Keep no record. How wonderful would it be, the next argument you had with spouse or significant other, if you could actually deal with that issue only and not bring up anything else from yesterday or a week ago or 2 years ago. And say, no, hold on, stop right now. We're not talking about what happened last week. We're talking about this issue today. And man, you could work through problems in such a beautiful way if you just take that issue and say, hey, let's work our way through this. Yeah, but you always do this. You never do this. Well, we're not talking about always and never. We're talking about now. It'd just be a beautiful way to problem solve in any relationship that you have. And the last verse there, Javier.
Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins.
Could it be that Jacob's love for his son, Joseph, was so deep, so strong, so powerful, and we know that it was because he wept when he heard that he was lost. Could it be that his love was so powerful that his love covered over a multitude of his brother's sins? And he was just so excited at the good news that bringing up the past just didn't matter anymore. His love just covered over a multitude of sins. Oh God, fill us with that kind of love for people that have hurt us. Fill us with that kind of love for people who haven't met up to our expectations. And by the way, I heard this on the radio from Rick Warren this week, and I really thought it was good. If you're expecting other people to be perfect, you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. Because nobody's perfect, especially you. And we will be miserable if we expect perfection from other people. Striving for excellence and being in the making progress and always developing to be better, that's a great thing. In the military, we have our core values. I'm going to put Javier on the spot. Javier, what's our core values? Do you remember? One of the three? Integrity first. Got it. Integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. We should try and do life with excellence, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Yes, we should. But I'll tell you, excellence is not perfection. You don't have to be perfect to be striving toward excellence. I don't know how that tied in. That just sounded like a good thing to say right now. Oh, maybe the multitude of sins. Because love covers over a multitude of sins. And we're not saying that we go into denial. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that we don't identify a problem and then have course correction to deal with that problem effectively. I'm not suggesting we are blind to things that have hurt us. What I am suggesting is that we identify it and we feel it and we experience it, and then we choose to forgive it and focus on the moment. And that's a whole different way of business. That's a whole different way of business. Because the good news of the moment can overpower the elephant in the room of that negativity of the past, can't it? And let's think about this. The negativity that may have been around Jesus, when they heard he was alive, what else matters? Well, who cares if your little baby took the remote control and slammed it against the TV and broke the TV screen? If Jesus is alive, Who cares? I mean, who cares about, no. When you look at all the positive, the stuff that's going on today, that's so good, so right, so positive, man, that's the place to focus. We can't change the past, but we can control how we choose to respond to it. Cannot change the past. And one of the big issues that you'll be hearing me talk more about, it's part of my doctoral program, is this whole concept of acceptance. Acceptance. Acceptance is a beautiful thing. When you can come to a place of acceptance, acceptance with cancer, acceptance with a relationship that's broken, acceptance with the loss of a loved one. When you can get to that place, and it's not easy, but you can get there, it can reinvigorate your life. It can bring a peace to you that you haven't experienced in a while, if we can come to that place. And when we realize we cannot change the past, but we can accept what's happened, and now we can move forward in that acceptance, it can become just a real building block for us. We can choose how we respond to it, and we know that 80% of life is 20% of life is what happens to us, and 80% of life is how we respond to it. We've all heard that before. I can't change the past. You cannot change the past, so why dwell there? What we can do is reframe it. Take a negative and turn it into a positive. Take a defeat and turn it into a victory. Take a loss and turn it into a win. We can reframe it. And we can be reinvigorated by it. And we can learn from it. And that's all how we view it. And though we can't change it, we can make good come out of it. And that's what Jacob is doing. His love seems to overlook the lies of the brothers and the pain that he had when he heard his son was dead, in light of the wonderful moment of hearing that his son is alive. Thoughts as we go into communion. Does this trigger any thoughts in your mind?
Yes.
Gene?